webinar, Prepping for Your Marketing Efforts for 2021. We know that this is a critical time for organizations as you start planning out what your marketing is going to look like for 2021, what that strategy is going to look like, what your budgets are going to look like. I know that we ourselves are doing that right now, and so we thought this was a great opportunity to provide some insight that we've seen over the last several months, and hopefully it'll help you all as you get started in Q4 as well. And so I know that most of you on the call today are pretty familiar with Sierra Social Digital, but for those of you that aren't, we are an online communications and marketing agency. We specialize in social media, website development, and a number of integrated tactics. We consider ourselves experts on reaching core audiences through online channels, and we love merging those approaches with traditional communication practices because we do dabble in traditional as well. And we really pride ourselves on finding ways that our clients can continuously innovate their reach. My name is Donyelle Lucero. I have worked in digital marketing for about 10 years, the last 5 of which have been with Sierra Social Digital. I started out as an account executive with the agency and now manage our team and our book of client projects as the client experience manager. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today and talk strategy because that's probably my favorite part of my job currently. So I wanted to give you a roadmap for what we're going to be covering today. So if ever you can jump to the next slide. So we want to take a look back, as painful as it might be, at 2020, because I think that there are a lot of important lessons that we can pull out of the things that have transpired over the last several months, and we can really use those to our advantage in 2021. We also want to capitalize on what's changed in 2020 and what's currently changing so that we can anticipate customer and client needs more efficiently moving forward. And then we'll also take a look at what things you should consider investing in 2021. And so my hope for this webinar is that you can leave here with a few things today. Number one, being able to really identify your organization's current marketing strengths and areas of opportunity. We also want to give you some ideas on how you can add value for your client and customers, because that is really important right now as there's a lot of challenges that have come with how we're delivering messages, products and services to customers today. We also want to look at utilizing trends to draw out your 2021 marketing strategy, and again, setting your marketing budget for next year. And we've also left quite a bit of time at the end of today's presentation so that we can answer any questions that you might have. So we will get started and take a look back on 2020. The first point that I wanted to make on this was looking at what has changed specifically for your business. A lot of things have changed, but what specifically have those changes meant for your business? And I would encourage you to take a look at this a couple of different ways. Number one, logistically, what has changed? So are you at a limited capacity in which you can serve your customers? This could be, limited hours of operation, the fact that you can't hold large events or deliver programming in the same way that you have for years. But you also really want to focus on how customer behavior has shifted for your business. So obviously looking at, sales or enrollment or memberships, how they have either increased or decreased. Has your web traffic gone up? What are your customers buying? And are your customers able to find you? How are they finding you? If they can't find you, then we know that's the number one challenge that you have that you need to focus on, right? But these are all really important questions to ask yourself as you draw out your strategy for 2021 and how you shift marketing initiatives moving forward. I would also encourage you to take a really deep look at what marketing initiatives have you previously used or are using right now that are working. And we actually asked this of a client that we recently onboarded and just said, you know, looking at the last several months, what's the number one marketing initiative that you have working right now? And they, without missing a beat, said hands down, it was text message marketing. They saw that when they sent out a text message to their customers, they got traffic in their door, sales went up, their customers knew what was happening within the organization in terms of changes in their hours or what that meant for being able to go in and shop. And so looking at what's working is really important. And if that answer isn't as apparent to you as it was for this particular client, that's okay. We're gonna take a closer look at how you can identify some of those strengths here in just a bit. The third point is looking at how you can stand out or things that you have done to stand out. What are some things that you can do to differentiate yourself from the competition? And something else that I would encourage you to do as you're doing research and creating your strategy is really paying attention to what your competition has done to gain an edge. What are some things that you can adapt? Not only your competition in your immediate market locally, but also looking at what brands nationally and internationally have done that you can kind of adapt into your own strategy. The fourth point is really looking at what has changed for your organization internally. And this is really important as you move into 2021, because a lot of things have changed for businesses in terms of, you know, losing staff, roles being shifted around. Some companies have taken their marketing in-house, which has been a big change for them. And so when you're thinking about launching new initiatives, you're going to want to make sure that your team has the capacity to launch things successfully, that you have the time that it takes now in Q4 to train staff or do the research that you're going to need to get those off the ground. And you also want to make sure that you have a point person to help oversee new projects or initiatives from start to finish. You don't want to do we're going to just, you know, learn as we go and hope for the best. You really can take this next few months to do your homework and make sure that the initiatives that you're looking to launch in 2021 are going to be successful. So if you had trouble answering some of those questions on the previous slide, I would encourage you to look at existing data that you have to help pinpoint those strengths and weaknesses. So again, sales, are they up, down? Are you measuring your web traffic month over month? Are you looking at what your customers are looking at on your website? Those are going to be really important in identifying some of those strengths and weaknesses. Also looking at your email and social media analytics. So how are people engaging with your social media? Are they engaging? Are people opening the email that you're sending to them? You know, these are channels that require a lot of time and energy. And so you want to make sure that you're using them effectively and putting your energy into the right place. So analytics are going to be really important. And I would say if you're not currently looking at your web traffic, your email and social media analytics, it's not too late to pull those and see what those look like for 2020 or even beyond that, and see how they compare from 2019 to 2020, and see how behaviors have shifted a bit. I would also encourage you to look at your fundraising revenue. I know that without a doubt that has been impacted in 2020. But what about your partners and community? You know, how have they taken a hit, and how can that have a direct impact on your sales or fundraising? If you're relying on partners, donors for some of that fundraising revenue, you'll really want to consider how you move into 2021 with a new plan. So now that we reflected on what's happened in 2020, let's talk a little bit about what we've learned. So I think everyone recognizes this if you're a Friends fan. For some of us, 2020 has forced us to look at the obvious. The obvious might be, you know, we need to differentiate our fundraising. You know, revenue is it hinged on one big event that you weren't able to hold in 2020? That might have been a conversation you've been having with your organization for years. And this might push you into really thinking about how you differentiate your fundraising or your sales. And then also knowing that we need to offer customers and clients digital experiences. So things as simple as being able to order food online, to attending events through digital platforms. Those are just some obvious things that I think have really pushed people into making it a reality over the last several months. And then also things like having a mobile-friendly website. If you don't have a mobile-friendly website, you're late to the party or the dumpster fire that is 2020, but we know that that is really important in reaching today's customers. You know, some of those things that are a little more obvious, but it's also taught us valuable lessons about positioning your business to adapt really quickly and meet your customers where they're at. So businesses need to think even more about their customers' experience and really anticipating their needs. So really just kind of being ahead of whatever curveballs are going to be thrown in 2021. So let's jump into what some of those are specifically. So 2020 has kind of created this mad dash to digital. So people are updating their websites, they're offering online ordering, virtual learning experiences. And so now that you've realized how important that is, when you start drawing out your marketing strategy, I would encourage you to create a digital specific strategy to go along with that. How does that play into some of the traditional things that you do? And what are some of those individual tactics that you really want to focus on next year? I talked a little bit about a client that was able to identify right away what's been working for them, which is great because you know you want to keep doing that. But I would also challenge you to look at how you can take what's working a step further. So for example, when we were drawing out the strategy for that client specifically, knowing that text message marketing works so well, we looked at how they can expand upon that. So, you know, looking at what's going to be happening in the next few months for them with, you know, COVID cases going up and the fact that they might be at limited capacity or even more limited moving forward in terms of having shoppers in their stores. They might have to think about people waiting in line to get into their store. But it's getting colder. I doubt anyone would want to be standing outside a store today. And so we expressed there might be a need for expanding their text message marketing to sort of like a feature that is now offered that's like a wait list. Where customers can pull up in their vehicle, put themselves in a digital queue, and then they get a text message when they are next in line to go into the store. And so we see this a lot with like grocery pickup. I know a lot of doctors' offices have adapted this, but there's no reason why for your retail, your restaurant, you couldn't use something like that. And so really just looking at how do we take what's working and make it even better for the client. Listening to your customers is really, really important. So, you know, social media is a great place to have those conversations with your customers, people leaving reviews on different sites, and even the in-person interactions that you have, really getting their feedback is critical. But you don't have to wait for that feedback to be given. You can utilize things like social media polls. If you're a B2B organization, reach out to some of your longstanding clients and ask for their feedback or ask what could make their lives easier in 2021 and how can you be part of that. I think having those honest conversations will mean a lot to your customers and really build on that loyalty. And it's going to help drive your strategy as well. And while this is a really stressful time, it's a really exciting time, I think, for marketers to get creative. Really just being able to sit with your team and brainstorm how to innovate and take things to your customers in different ways. So yes, you can't have in-person events or, you know, you can't do things the same way. Think about, I think a lot of people get intimidated when they think about taking something as a whole and shifting it. But even starting with little pieces will help get baby steps to where you're going. So, for example, we work with the Carrie Tingley Hospital Foundation, and usually around this time, they're really ramping up for Festival of Trees. It's one of their largest fundraisers every year. And in addition to, gala and auction and people buying the trees at that event, they have a what they call a giving tree. And on there is paper ornaments, and each one represents different dollar amounts for specific things. And they are small ticket and large ticket items. So people could go to that tree and do something like one day of camp for a Carrie Tingley kid to attend in the summertime, up to an adaptive trike. People really like when they know where their dollars are going. And so that's been a really great way for them to garner some additional donations at that event. And so what we're doing on the digital side for them is taking that small piece of that event and putting it up digitally for people. So we're building like an interactive tree where people can go online, and it's the same kind of thing. They can click around on different ornaments, pick out what they want to donate, and that all of that funding is now taken online. They're also working with another community partner who is doing sort of a drive-through holiday event, and they're taking some element of Festival of Trees within that. And so they're little pieces of the pie, but they're still garnering some revenue for it. So not all is lost there. And so really thinking about the smaller pieces is just as important as thinking broad, high level. Whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that you're staying true to what the customer's needs are. And I really think that trust is going to be of the utmost importance post-pandemic. So really thinking about how the customer is feeling during this time. If their safety is really important to them, they're going to want to see that you took the steps needed to keep them safe. And really, were you able to meet them where they were at? And did you try to meet them where they were at? Those are things that are going to go a long way with your customers. And so on the following slides, we're going to jump into some of those specific tactics to help shape your strategy. So personalizing the customer experience is going to be number one. I recently read an article that I think outlined this really well, and they talked about the future of customer experience as being a personalized white glove service for all. Kind of this like attainable, luxury service that was once unattainable for everyone is now attainable. So when it comes to customer retention, I'd really encourage you to focus on attention to detail, convenience, speed, and emotional fulfillment. All of those things are really going to lead to a deeper customer trust and loyalty to your brand. Another thing that you can do is really engage through digital channels. Having those conversations and people feeling like they're being heard and talking to an actual person humanizes your brand, delivers a personal experience, and this can actually help reduce callback time, valuable energy from your staff, and could lead to reduced costs as well. Being proactive rather than reactive is something that I think is a no-brainer. People have, or organizations have been thinking about that for years, but I think now more than ever, it's really important. So really anticipating what your customer needs are going to be in the next several months. And then while you're unable to serve large groups, I think this is a really great time for you to promote to smaller groups, because that's what you're able to serve. More of these like intimate, private, exclusive experiences. So people now are figuring out that they kind of like that. While they miss being able to go out and socialize and be in large crowds, they've also really enjoyed these smaller gatherings where they have a lot of attention on their small group. I know that I took my family to the zoo a few weeks ago, and I'm like, I don't even know if I would enjoy the zoo the same way, because there was, you know, so few people in the park, and we were able to really stop and not have to fight our way through a crowd to see the tigers. And so I think that there's really great innovative ways to offer that kind of experience to your customers during this time. And customers are going to kind of come to expect that, and kind of get used to that. And so thinking about how you do that in 2021 is important. And you know, sometimes this can seem a little bit costly, and sometimes it is, but I think in the long run, it really, really goes a long way, and it makes up for the costs. We have a restaurant located in Santa Fe that when they were ordered to close down, but were able to do delivery and takeout, they didn't do so right away. They realized that their clientele comes in for high quality food, and that if they did that overnight, it wasn't going to be the same if it was delivered to their home or even taken home. So they really did a voluntary shutdown for a couple of weeks to really think out their menus and how they could deliver that same level of quality and service to their customers. And during that time also took steps to train their staff and plan out for when they could reopen. And so that way, when they were able to, they already had a plan in place. You know, restaurants usually had less than a 24-hour turnaround when they were told, yes, you can reopen. And for them, they were already prepared. And we saw that pay off through just the social media engagement, through the reviews that were coming in. People were really impressed with the way they handled rolling out that delivery and takeout service. And when they were able to reopen, the experience that they got out of that. And while your customers are now turning to digital platforms, this is the time that it's critical to capture all that data so that you can better serve them down the line. So really thinking about looking at what people are, you know, how people are shopping, what they're shopping for, all of that data is going to serve you down the road. So I would encourage you to track that now. River, if you could jump to the next slide, please. So when you start your strategy, calendar everything out now and consider the logistics of it. Look at all of the important dates and events that will need your marketing efforts. And then think about how you can take some of these events virtually. And then thinking ahead of that, how will you respond to webinar and virtual event fatigue? Because we're already seeing that increasingly now. A lot of people are getting tired of sitting in front of their computers. I'm sure you guys have looked at the clock about now and been like, okay, how much longer is this webinar? But I would encourage you to get creative with how you fight that. Our CEO just recently rented a goat for a meeting, or a llama. It was some kind of cute farm animal. But really just kind of throwing in some fun things to make your event different is going to be important. So fighting virtual fatigue should be something that you think about when you're drawing your marketing strategy. And then I would also think about when you're planning, you know, how to start incorporating physical events back into your marketing mix. I would plan for a worst case and best case scenario. You know, 2020 has taught us that we can't rely on things going back to normal in a certain time frame. So planning accordingly is critical. That's going to affect not only your marketing calendar, but your budget. So if you can, you know, start thinking about, here's what we can do if it's limited to this, or here's what we could do if, you know, we're able to hold a larger scale event. I am getting ready to take over the board of a nonprofit, and we're doing that now where, you know, if we have, you know, if things really turn around, here's what we will do with this budget. But if we're limited, what other things can we offer to the families that we serve in terms of keeping everyone safe, following the rules, and creating really valuable experiences. So next slide, please, River. I talked a little bit when I mentioned Carrie Tingley about the importance of partnerships, but some of the other partnerships that you can think of can be influencers, and I'm not just talking about the ones on Instagram, although social media influencing is really, really great for some organizations. There are social media influencers in every single industry you can think of. And so seeking out the right kind of influencers who can talk about your products and your services and pull in new audiences for your organization is huge. But you also want to think about influencers outside of social media. So having speakers at your virtual events that have a lot of clout that would bring in customers and clients or people to attend your events. And then also identifying leaders in your communities who can champion your brand. Looking for opportunities to be featured on podcasts or have people at your organization be guests on podcasts. Now is a great time to, utilize your relationships with media. Take your contact, your reporter, the producer that to lunch and talk about what kind of stories are being passed in the newsroom, or what are people wanting to hear about. That insight is going to be really great as you're thinking about your strategy and what you need to be on the lookout for. And then also tune into what's being said currently about your brand online. There might be conversations happening between customers, specifically about your brand or just related to your industry in general that are going to be super useful. And you're never going to know where those influences are going to come from. And I think that's said best if you ask someone from Ocean Spray. You just never know where your influencers are going to come from. So paying attention to those online conversations is really important. And I hope everybody knows who this is. And if you don't, we'll talk about it during the Q&A portion of this later on. Next slide, please, River. So we talked about digital virtual experiences, but I wanted to take just a closer look at how you can create some of this for your strategy. I think that the NBA and NFL have really done a great job of bringing that experience to their fans on a large scale. After the sports drought that we had this summer, fans were just super eager to participate in any way possible with their teams. And so bringing this, opportunity for fans to be, on the screens of the games, was it the same as being at a game? No, but I think that they did a really great job of bringing the action to them in a way, again, that was that they could, that was safe, and really just meeting their fans where they were at. And so, things like video and virtual tours, if you're in realty, virtual tours are huge. If you weren't already doing that, hopefully you're doing that now. Those are really important digital experiences that are easy to get off the ground. So while NFL and NBA, like I said, did this on a larger scale, there are smaller things that you can do now to create those digital experiences for your customers. So real-time emphatic engagement is, again, another important thing that I discussed earlier, but social media conversations, integrating chatbots onto your website, and then again, those video and virtual tours are easy ways that you can start introducing and offering these digital experiences. Another company that did this really well, and so River, if you'll jump to the next screen, was Airbnb. Because another thing that you're going to want to think about incorporating into your 2021 strategy is, how is your organization doing good for your community or for your customers and clients? That's going to go a long way with the people that you serve. So this is a great example of how you can build on your existing relationships with your partners and fostering community. Airbnb created, when they saw that travel was down and was probably going to be down for a while, they tapped into the partners that they were already working with in terms of selling experiences when people went on vacation, things like tours and cooking classes, and they brought those experiences online. So people could do these online field trips. And you can see on the screen, they were for, as little as $14, $25, $10 a person. And our team actually did a couple of these. We went to Ireland a couple of weeks ago, and we sat with a tour guide who would normally during this time be out giving tours to people visiting his city. And he was able to do a virtual experience with us, give us a history lesson, kind of the same experience you would have without physically being there. But Airbnb recognized that their partners were in trouble. They were losing revenue. And so this was kind of a way to help bridge some of those relationships until things do get back to a quote unquote normal. So again, think about how can you help people in your community, your current clientele. This is a conversation that we've had a lot internally at our agency, and that's kind of how we came about with doing these monthly webinars. This was kind of something that we're like, this might be helpful to some of our peers, to some of our current clients. So thinking about how you can do good during this time would be another thing that I would encourage you to add to your strategy. Oh, back one. Oh, back a few times. Just, I think, jump 2. There we go. So as you're setting goals for your strategy, think about smarter goals. And I know that there's variations of this acronym. I use the ones that I think tap into the things that we talked about today. So be really specific with the things that you want to do in 2021. And make sure that there are things that are measurable so that you can tell right away if they're going to work. And if you need a shift early on in Q1 or Q2, you're able to do so. Sometimes what we think will be really helpful for an organization when we've looked at the data, realize that we're not meeting our target audiences where they're at. So learning how to shift early on will be incredibly important. And then actionable, making sure that the goals that you're setting are achievable. Again, making sure that you have the team in place to pull off those initiatives successfully. And then recognizing that things will take time and really thinking about how you draw things out in a way that makes sense for your organization. But also, jumping to the next one, being time-bound, deadline driven, giving things time to work, when to pull back. Those are things that you should really consider as well. Going back to the innovation piece, creating things that are exciting for your customers and clients. And then relevancy. Does the tactic make sense for your company? Don't be on TikTok just to be on TikTok. I know everyone's talking about TikTok, but how is your brand going to actually utilize TikTok in a way that makes sense and meets your goals? What works for one organization is not necessarily going to work for another. So with that being said, let's dive into budgeting for 2021. I know it's really difficult at this point in time to decide what changes you should invest in. So here are some tips on how to get started on that. First of all, what does your budget look like for 2021? I think by now people have realized that they are going to be working on tighter budgets for 2021, or they need to shift some things around. So if your marketing budget's staying the same, look at your wish list. What do you want to get off the ground in 2021? By identifying what's working, you can really think about what you need to work or expand on. You can also weed out what isn't working so you can start tackling that wish list. So is it, digital advertising? Is it a new website? You've realized that the one that you have now isn't working to serve your customer needs at the moment? Or is it getting an app off the ground that's going to make sales and the customer service experience easier. If your budget is shifting, make a list of what can and can't wait. Again, data is really important in helping you decide what that looks like, but you really want to focus on what's going to help you reach the marketing goals that you set and if they are going to help you find your customers. And remember, I talked about calendar everything out. So events, fundraising, recurring sponsorships, advertising that you regularly take part in. Get that all calendared out and then take a look and see what's actually been working for your organization over the last couple of years. This is going to help you shift where you need to, or even do away with things that have not been effective for you. But before you do that, and if we're ready, you can jump to the next slide. Before you cut anything out, I would encourage you to look at, have we done this effectively or the way that it should be done? Or are there other pressing marketing needs that we should focus on rather than cutting our marketing budget? So again, calendar will be critical at this point. Also looking for those partnerships. How can you leverage your relationships with community partners, existing donors, to kind of help tackle the cost of those initiatives? And again, that Carrie Tingley example that I gave you is a perfect example of how you can, I think, start out thinking this is never going to work, but taking those little pieces and creating something different. And then also consider hiring professionals to help. If you've tried doing social media advertising or digital advertising of some kind for the last couple of months and you're kind of at a loss of like, I don't know if this is working, I feel like we're throwing money out the door, hiring professionals to help with those pieces seems like you might be spending more money up front, but will actually pay off in the long run. And so those are just some tips as you're drawing out your 2021 budget that I would keep in mind. And so at this time, I am happy to answer any questions that you all have. I hope that some of these tactics have been helpful for you as you sit down with your marketing teams and put your strategy together. But if you guys have any specific questions, let me know.
Hey, Donyelle, we did have a question come in from social media. So for those who are in the nonprofit world looking for fundraising opportunities, how much should we budget knowing we're focusing on return on investment?
The $1 million question, how much? So I think it goes back to looking at what has been working currently and what has not. So if a lot of time and energy has been put into fundraising initiatives with very little return on investment, I would say focus your efforts on what is working. So maybe not allocating, like this full budget over to another initiative, but throwing some additional dollars on it, or how do we add value on this one fundraising initiative where it's going to attract people to this one thing. Now, that being said, we need to remember, to differentiate our fundraising, right? We don't want everything to hinge on one thing, because if it's not successful and you don't have a backup plan, that's going to be really difficult. But the best advice I can give is to think outside the box. A lot of people are thinking about Giving Tuesday. A lot of nonprofits are thinking about Giving Tuesday here pretty quick. And we know, looking at, the last several years, that is a really oversaturated day in terms of asks. And so thinking about how you can create a campaign that either caps off with Giving Tuesday or launches on Giving Tuesday, you're still tapping into that day, right? But you're drawing out a larger campaign that people can take part in for a longer period of time. It's not isolated to that one day. And so I think that, again, kind of calendaring out what those initiatives are, taking a look at what's working, what's not working, take what's working and see if you can draw out some additional ideas on how to create a better experience for your donors, for your attendees at an event. And so that would kind of be where I would start there.
All right. Thank you so much for that insightful answer. We do have another question from Connor Adams. So he works in a nonprofit. I'm sorry, it's not a question, it's a statement. He tries to spend $20, 20 cents to raise $1. Currently, he's around 15 cents to raise a dollar. More than 25 to raise a dollar this time is time to reconsider your efforts. So that would be advice from Connor Adams. Another question from the social media channels. For those of us that have seasonal companies or seasonal sales cycles, what do you think would be helpful or hurtful for us in marketing for 2021?
So I think that sitting back and doing nothing during the lulls. So that's the critical time when I talked about the restaurant that used that couple of weeks to be in shutdown to really prepare and ramp up. At the same time, they were also in close contact with their customers, letting them know what was going on. So being really thoughtful and methodical during those downtimes about how you make the process simpler, easier for customers. So for example, if you are planning to create a new website, that's the perfect time to really start, or new features on your website. When you know people aren't going to be as active on your website, really getting those features integrated, working out all the kinks. That way, during those seasonal shifts where you are super busy, you know that everything is working as smoothly as possible, and you've created a really great experience for your customers during that time. So just making sure that you're always actively thinking about how you can improve the experience for your customers. And that downtime is a great time to think about that.
All right. And then we had one more question. And how does that relate to tourism? How should tourism look at shifting or pivoting their marketing tactics, since tourism is both seasonal and also being one of the most heavily impacted industries right now?
Yeah, so that's something we actually did with a client recently. They had just launched a women's retreat. It was kind of a vacation and retreat experience for women. And so in 2019, they did their first one in Puerto Vallarta, and it was super successful. They did a really small inaugural group and had a lot of positive feedback. A lot of good revenue for a first time event of that kind. And then of course, when 2020 happened, they had one set for May and had to cancel it. And, it was kind of a mess in terms of, working with the hotel to get dates shifted. They had already prepaid for a lot of things. But what they did in the meantime was also focus on the customer. And they realized that their target audience, which is women and about like 40 and older, they needed some sort of vacation retreat during this time. And so they were able to bring that to them through a digital experience. And so they did what was called goddess staycation, where women could sign up for this digital experience, and they had people, led meditation, these really in-depth inquiry sessions. They gave them guest speakers and tools throughout the week of things that they could do just to incorporate into their routine, because they recognize that these women who have families, have professional careers, volunteer in their community, they needed that break more than anyone during the pandemic. And that was something that they could bring to their customers, knowing that vacations would come later on, but they were able to bring these transformative experiences to their laptop every Saturday morning. And it was, they had tremendous feedback from women that were like, I knew I needed this, I just didn't know how much I needed it. And I wasn't expecting to get out of it what I did. So thinking about how you can bring those experiences, again, meeting your customer where they're at. Airbnb, another great example of how they were able to do these virtual tours, these history lessons, are just, ways that you can bring that tourism or vacation feel to customers where they're at.
All right, thank you so much. And we have another question from the audience in the Zoom chat from Tiffany Steger. How do you start planning when there is no past to look at to see what's worked? The company that Tiffany works for has not had a digital presence until a few months ago and doesn't have a system for tracking anything.
Yeah, so that's a challenge that a lot of our clients have when they come to us, because they're like, we're not on digital, so what do we do now? start tracking it now. Now is the best time to just get all of those things implemented. And um, it only takes a few months to start really looking at those trends. So you want to give it time to work, but you want to start capturing all of that right away. And so think about your strategy in, either two parts, first half of the year, second half of the year, or take it quarter by quarter, and anticipate that you might need to shift some things in quarter two and quarter three. But really taking a look at that data moving forward is going to be critical for you. Also think about even just sales numbers, existing data that you might not even know you have. So for example, in customer orders, if there's emails, start utilizing those to build email lists. There is maybe some data that is a little bit harder to draw out, but might exist out there. So just look at what might exist outside of the digital realm. And again, just start tracking what your audiences are doing on digital platforms now so that you can use them in Q2 and beyond that. All right, so I think we're getting ready to wrap. I know River just sent a message out to everyone, but I do want to thank you all for sitting in on today's webinar. Again, I hope that some of these ideas are helpful as you start drawing out your strategies. Feel free to reach out to us if you do have additional questions. And a reminder that we are going to be posting today's webinars recording, so you'll have access to these slides and some of this information after today. So thanks so much for joining us. All right. Is my team still there?